My name is Julian Morales, 27. Drowning in $38,000 of art school debt and currently living off expired yogurt and whatever free bread. The bakery on 9th Street leaves out back. Everyone has a price, they say. Mine turned out to be $6,000. And the promise of 3 decent meals a week. I found the listing at 3:17 a.m. on a site that usually offered gigs like transcribe terrible handwriting for $12 HR or be a mystery shopper at vape stores. This one was different, seeking companion for limited engagement, family obligations, 8 weeks. $6,000 total, absolute privacy required, New York City area. I should have scrolled past. Instead, I clicked, sent a message, and by sunrise, I had a reply from someone named Leonid Volkov asking if I was free to meet that afternoon at a quiet wine bar in Nolita. I arrived 20 minutes early, wearing the only blazer I owned that didn't smell like the subway. The bar was all dark wood and low jazz, the kind of place where one glass of wine costs more than my weekly grocery budget. I nursed a club soda with lime so I could pretend I belonged. He walked in at exactly 4 o'clock. I'd expected someone older. Maybe a divorced finance bro with a Hamptons share. Instead, Leonid looked like he'd stepped off a runway in Moscow and taken a wrong turn into real life. Black coat, charcoal scarf, cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. Eyes the color of winter water, pale gray-green, unreadable. He scanned the room once, found me, and crossed the floor with the kind of deliberate calm that made people move out of his way without realizing they were doing it. Julian? His accent was faint, expensive, like he'd learned English from BBC announcers and private tutors. That's me. Stood too fast and nearly knocked over my glass. He smiled, small and polite, and offered his hand. His fingers were cold. Leonid, thank you for coming. We sat in a corner booth. He ordered a bottle of something French I couldn't pronounce and didn't look at the price list. So, I said, once the waiter left, fake boyfriend. He didn't flinch. Fake fiance, technically. My grandmother arrives from St. Petersburg in 10 days. She is traditional. She believes if I am not married by 35, I will die alone and the family bloodline ends with me. A flicker of something dry and self-macking crossed his face. She is dramatic. How old are you? 34. Next month. She has a calendar. I laughed before I could stop myself. He watched me like he was trying to decide if the laugh was real. I think it surprised both of us that it was. He slid a cream envelope across the table. $3,000 now. $3,000 after her departure. 8 weeks, 5 events, a rival dinner, Orthodox Easter, a charity auction, the ballet, and her farewell brunch. You will need a suit for the ballet. I will buy it. I stared at the envelope. $3,000 would pay rent for 2 months and keep the lights on. 6 would clear the worst of my credit card debt and maybe let me breathe. Why me? I asked. He tilted his head. Your photographs. I blinked. What? On your portfolio site. The series you shot in Red Hook last winter, the shipyard at dusk, the man feeding gulls from his balcony, there is honesty in them. My grandmother will sense a lie in 5 seconds. I need someone who feels truthful. I hadn't updated that website in 2 years. The fact that he'd found it, studied it, made something warm and dangerous uncurl in my chest. And the fiancé part. I asked, that's a big ask. He looked down at his wine, then back at me. The winter eyes softened, just a fraction. She is sick. Lung cancer, late stage. The doctors give her months, perhaps a year if the new treatment works. This may be the last time she visits America. I want her to leave believing I am happy. That someone loves me. His voice stayed level, almost clinical, but I heard the fracture underneath. I can buy many things, Julian. Peace of mind for an old woman is apparently not one of them. I thought of my own abuela. How she used to cross herself every time I brought a boy home. How she still slipped holy cards into my birthday envelopes, even though I hadn't been to Mass since I was 16. Family is a complicated currency. I took the envelope. We spent the next week cramming 8 months of imaginary courtship into coffee dates and long walks, so we could learn each other without an audience. He told me he'd grown up between Moscow and London, that his father built half the luxury condos in Brooklyn, that he restored vintage motorcycles when he wasn't closing 8-figure real estate deals. I told him about growing up in Sunset Park, about art school, about the ex who'd left me with the cat and most of the debt. We built our story carefully. We'd met at my first gallery show, a lie. I'd never had one. Locked eyes across the room. And he'd bought the shipyard photograph on the spot. For an amount neither of us specified because it sounded more romantic that way. The first test was the arrival dinner at his parents' penthouse on Central Park West. I wore the midnight blue suit he'd had tailored for me. It fit like it had been waiting its whole life to be on my body. Leonid's eyes darkened when he saw me. "You look—" He stopped, cleared his throat. "Appropriate." The apartment was museum quiet, all marble and modern art and the faint scent of orchids. His grandmother, Sofia Valentinovna, was tiny, wrapped in silver fox and disapproval, but her eyes were the same winter color as her grandson's and twice as sharp. Leonid greeted her in rapid Russian, bending to kiss her cheeks. Then he switched to English and reached for my hand. "Babushka, this is Julian. My fiancé." I felt her gaze pin me like a butterfly to cork. I smiled, the one I used for gallery openings I was too broke to attend, and said in the careful Spanish I'd practiced, "Mucho gusto, Dona Sofia. Leonid speaks of you often."
Oh.
Her eyebrows lifted. Leonid's fingers tightened around mine. Surprise, and something like pride. By the end of dinner, she was calling me Yulian Cito and pressing honey cake on me like I was already family later. On the balcony, the city glittering below us like spilled coins, Leonid handed me a glass of champagne. "You were perfect," he said quietly. "So were you." I bumped his shoulder. I especially liked the part where you almost choked when she asked if we'd set a date. He laughed, soft, surprised again. I decided I wanted to keep making him laugh like that. Week 3. He took me to the garage in Red Hook where he kept the motorcycles. He was restoring a 1974 BMW R9 OS, paint the color of fresh blood. He handed me a helmet without asking if I wanted a ride. I climbed on behind him, arms around his waist, and we flew over the bridge with the city lights smearing into gold. I felt his heart beat through the leather jacket. Steady and real, and realized the pretend parts were starting to blur at the edges. The night of the ballet. He gave me cufflinks, white gold tiny sapphires. "They were my grandfather's," he said, fastening them himself because my hands were shaking. His thumb brushed my wrist and stayed there a second too long. At intermission, in the crush of diamonds and tuxedos, he introduced me as my Julian to people whose names I recognized from Forbes. Every time he said it, something in my chest cracked open a little wider. Easter came. We dyed eggs red in his kitchen at 2 in the morning because that's the tradition, apparently. I got yolk on his $8,000 countertop, and he wiped it up without comment, then licked a smear of red off my thumb when he thought I wasn't looking. I was looking. The charity auction was the worst. Some hedge fund guy cornered me by the bar and asked, smirking, if I was Leonid's latest rescue project. Leonid appeared like smoke, slid an arm around my waist, and answered in a voice cold enough to frost glass. No, he's the one who rescued me. Later, in the car, he stared out the window and said, so quietly I almost missed it, I hate that they think you're temporary. I didn't know what to say to that. The morning of Sophia's farewell brunch, I woke up in his bed. Not planned. We'd stayed up late practicing toasts, drinking too much vodka, and at some point the space between the guest room and his room had disappeared. He was already awake, propped on one elbow watching me. Sunlight through the penthouse windows turned his hair gold at the edges. This wasn't part of the deal, I said. I know. His fingers traced the line of my shoulder, careful, like I might vanish. I find I no longer care about the deal. Downstairs, Sophia pulled me aside while Leonid was saying goodbye to his parents. You make him soft, she told me in Russian accented English. This is good. He was ice before you? No. She pressed a small velvet box into my hand. Inside was a plain gold band, old and worn smooth. His dedushkas. When you are ready, you give this to him. Not before. Men like Lee and Ed must choose for themselves. She kissed my cheeks and left on the arm of her nurse. Waving until the elevator doors closed, we stood in the echoing marble lobby afterward, neither of us moving. 8 weeks were up. The job was over. Lee and Ed cleared his throat. Your final payment? I don't want it. He went very still. I pulled the velvet box from my pocket, opened it. The ring caught the light like it had been waiting 50 years for this moment. I was hired to pretend, I said. Turns out I'm terrible at pretending when it's you. For the first time since I'd met him, Leonid Volkov looked completely uncertain. Then he took the ring with shaking fingers, slid it onto his own left hand, and pulled me into him so hard I lost my breath. Marry me, he whispered against my temple. Not because she asked, not because of any arrangement. Marry me because I am stupidly, possibly in love with you, and I can't go back to the version of my life that doesn't have you in it. Marry me because I am stupidly and possibly in love with you, and I can't go back to the version of my life that doesn't have you in it. I laughed, or maybe I cried. It's hard to tell the difference sometimes, yes, I said. But only if I get to keep the motorcycle. He kissed me in the lobby like a man who'd just been handed the thing. He wanted most in the world and was terrified it might still be taken away. Later, when people asked how we met, we told them the truth, mostly. That he found me online in the middle of the night. That he paid me to fall in love with him. We just left out the part where I gave it away for free. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who answered an ad titled, "Temporary boyfriend needed, generous compensation." Yet there I was. Sitting across from Julian Hart in a quiet wine bar in the Pearl District, my hands wrapped around a glass of the cheapest red on the menu, because I still felt guilty letting someone else pay. Julian was unfairly beautiful in the low, golden light, sharp cheekbones, dark hair that looked like he'd just run a hand through it, and green eyes that kept flicking to me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. He wore a charcoal Henley and a watch that probably cost more than my rent. Everything about him screamed money, taste, and the kind of effortless confidence I'd never possessed. "You're sure you're okay with this?" He asked for the third time, voice low, almost careful. "It's unorthodox." I laughed, a little too sharp. "You posted on Craigslist, Julian. I think we left orthodox in the rearview mirror." He smiled at that, small and crooked, and something in my stomach flipped. The deal was simple on paper. Julian's grandfather, the one who'd built the family real estate empire from nothing and still ruled it at 87, was dying. Lung cancer. Months left, maybe less. And the old man had one dying wish, to see his only grandson settled down with someone decent. Before he went, Julian had been out to his family for a decade. No one cared that he was gay. They cared that he was 34, single, and in his grandfather's words, wasting his life on one-night stands and work. Enter me, Levi Callahan, 29, broke, perpetually underemployed copywriter, and apparently convincing enough to pass as the love of Julian Hart's life for the next few months, $50,000, half up front and half on the old man. Well, when it was over, I'd stared at the envelope he slid across the table like it might bite me. $25,000 in cash. I'd never held that much money in my life. "You can say no," Julian had said quietly. "I'll understand." But I had student loans, medical bills from when my mom broke her hip last year, and a landlord who'd started leaving passive-aggressive post-its on my door. So I said yes. He asked for my number. Gave it. My phone buzzed 30 seconds later. "Can't wait to start this with you, Jay." He stood, all 6'2" of him, and hesitated. "I know this is insane, but thank you, Levi. Really." He reached out like he was going to shake my hand, then seemed to think better of it and brushed his fingers against my wrist instead. Just a second of contact, but my skin lit up like I'd touched a live wire. "Tomorrow night?" He asked. "We should. Start building the story. Somewhere quiet. I'm free after 7. I'll text you." He left. And I sat there for a long time, staring at the envelope, wondering what the hell I'd just agreed to. The next night, he took me to a tiny sushi place tucked into an old warehouse. The kind of spot that didn't have a sign, and you only found if someone told you about it. I showed up in my one decent blazer navy, slightly too tight across the shoulders now, and jeans that had seen better days. Julian was already at the corner table. Sleeves rolled up, forearms lean and tan. He looked up when I walked in and smiled like I was the only person in the room. "Hey you," he said softly, standing. And before I could overthink it, he pulled me into a hug. Brief, polite. But I still caught the scent of cedar and something citrus and warm. "You look good," he said as we sat. "You're contractually obligated to say that now," I muttered. He laughed, low and genuine. "Order anything. Seriously." I ordered the chef's omakase because I had no idea what half the menu meant and didn't want to look cheap. He got the same, plus sake. Then he opened his phone. "Okay, origin story. How did we meet?" I took a sip of sake for courage. "What do you do exactly?" I should probably know.
Oh.
"Real estate development. My family owns half the new high-rises downtown. I mostly try to keep them from building ugly shit." "You're out at work?" "Yeah, Grandpa knows. He doesn't care who I love. He just wants me married before he dies so he can stop worrying. I'll die alone surrounded by cats and takeout boxes." I snorted. Romantic, right? "So, how does a heart fall for a guy who writes toothpaste slogans for a living?" I raised an eyebrow. "I also write brochures for luxury retirement communities." "Very on brand for you." He grinned. "Perfect. We met when my marketing team hired you to punch up the copy for the new riverfront condos. You came in for a meeting, roasted the hell out of our original tagline, something about elevated living, and I fell instantly in love with your sarcasm." "I can work with that," I said. "When?" 8 months ago. "Long enough to be real? New enough that I had an excuse not to mention you before?" "We built it piece by piece. First date. Coffee after the meeting turned into drinks, turned into me making him laugh so hard." He snorted wasabi up his nose at a different sushi place. "How we spend weekends. Record stores in Southeast, hiking in Forest Park. Cooking terrible Thai food at his loft while arguing about music he likes indie folk. I'm ride or die 90s hip-hop. Pet peeves. He can't stand when people leave one bite of food on the plate like they're too good to finish it. I hate slow walkers in grocery aisles. Nicknames. He calls me Lee when he's teasing. Baby when he's drunk or soft. Physical stuff. That part got quiet. Hand-holding's fine," he said, tracing the rim of his sake cup. "Arm around you. Kissing your temple, your cheek. Whatever feels natural." My mouth went dry. "And more than that." His eyes flicked up to mine. "If we have to. Family events. They'll expect us to look. Together. In love, the air between us felt suddenly too small. "We should probably practice," I said before I could lose my nerve, "so it's not weird in front of them." He didn't laugh or brush it off. Just looked at me for a long moment. "Yeah," he said finally, voice rough. "We should. But not here. Not in public. Not yet." We finished dinner. He paid. I didn't even try to fight him. Outside, the October air was sharp and damp. "Can I give you a ride home?" he asked. "I usually take the bus. Not tonight." His car was a low silver thing that growled when he started it. The inside smelled like him. I gave him my address in St. John's, the cheap part, near the industrial yards, and waited for the judgment that never came. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift. Close enough to mine that I could feel the heat. Halfway there, he spoke, barely above the engine. "This is the weirdest thing I've ever done." "Same. I don't want you to think I do this all the time." "Hire strangers too, I don't," I cut in. "Think that I mean?" Quiet again. When he pulled up outside my rundown apartment building, he killed the engine, but didn't move to get out. "Levi," I turned. His eyes were serious. "If at any point this feels wrong, too much, too weird, whatever you tell me. Money back, no questions." "Okay," I swallowed. Okay. He reached over slow enough that I could have moved away and brushed a thumb across my cheekbone. Just practicing, he murmured. My heart slammed against my ribs. Yeah, I managed. He leaned in not far. Just enough that I felt his breath against my lips, then stopped. Not yet, he said, almost to himself. Not like this. He pulled back, looking as shaken as I felt. I'll text you, he said. I got out on legs that didn't feel steady, watched him drive away inside my apartment. I leaned against the door and stared at the ceiling. I was in so much trouble, and the worst part? I was already looking forward to the next time. My name is Levi Calder, 29, broke, and one eviction notice away from sleeping in my ancient Subaru. I wrote copy for local boutiques and restaurants words that sold lavender candles and overpriced staccato toast, while my real novel, the one about a lighthouse keeper who falls in love with the storm that keeps trying to kill him, gathered dust and self-loathing in a Google Doc titled, Maybe Someday. That was how I met Julian Vale. He messaged me on a freelance site at 214a.m. Subject line. Unusual ghostwriting job, generous pay, short timeline. I almost deleted it. Instead, I opened it, because rent was due in 9 days, and I had $63 in checking. We met the next evening at a bar in Capitol Hill called the Quiet Engine. Julian was already there, sitting at the corner table like he owned the light itself. Tall, dark-haired, the kind of handsome that felt unfair. His watch probably cost more than my car. He stood when I approached, which no one ever does anymore. Levi. His voice was low, careful. Thank you for coming. He bought me a drink I didn't ask for and then laid it out like a business proposal. I need a boyfriend for 6 weeks. For family events, $25,000. I laughed because it sounded like the start of a scam or very niche porn. He didn't laugh back. My grandmother is dying, he said. Pancreatic cancer. She has maybe 3 months. All she wants before she goes is to know I'm happy, settled. She's old school Catholic, thinks I work too much and love too little. If I bring around another friend from the office, she'll spend her last days worrying I'll die alone. He looked down at the table. I can't let her do that. I studied him. He wasn't lying about the grief. It was in the set of his shoulders. Why me? I asked. He gave a small, embarrassed shrug. Your profile photo. You have kind eyes. And your writing samples? You made a candle sound like it could fix a broken heart. I thought if you can sell that, you can probably won't flinch when my Aunt Patricia asks if we're using protection. I should have walked away. Instead, I heard myself say, 25 is nice, but I'm going to need 30. And half up front. He didn't negotiate. Just slid a check across. Table like it was a napkin. We started rehearsing the next day. Julian's condo looked over Elliott Bay. Floor-to-ceiling windows and hot floors, and a kitchen bigger than my entire apartment. We sat on opposite ends of his charcoal sofa with note cards. Favorite color? His pine green. Mine, whatever color the sky is when it stops raining. First pet? His, a goldfish named Justice. Mine, a rescue mutt named Kerouac who ate 3 couches. How we met. We decided on a dog park. Easier to sell physical chemistry if there's an origin story. Involving wet tennis balls and mutual exasperation. We practiced touching. Hand-holding first awkward, then less so. Then the way he'd rest his palm at the small of my back when introducing me, like it belonged there. We practiced kissing too, because his cousin Miranda is apparently a body language bloodhound. The first kiss was clinical. The second lingered. By the fourth, I forgot we were counting. The first event was dinner with his parents at Canlis. The kind of restaurant that still has a dress code and a view that makes you forgive. Seattle for everything. Julian sent a suit to my apartment midnight blue. Perfect fit, with a note in sharp handwriting. Trust me. When he picked me up outside my crumbling brick building in Belltown, rain misting his hair, he looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You clean up dangerously, he said. I laughed too loud. You paid for the cleaning. Inside the car, he reached over and straightened my pocket square, fingers brushing my chest. Nervous? Terrified, I admitted. Good, he said. Me too. His mother, Evelyn, was all cheekbones and Chanel. His father, Charles, shook my hand like he was testing the weight of my soul. His grandmother, Ruth, was tiny in a lavender cardigan. Oxygen tubes discreet under her nose, eyes broken glass. She grabbed both my hands the moment I sat down. You're real, she said, wonder in her voice. I was starting to think Julian made you up. I smiled, throat tight. I'm definitely real, ma'am. Call me Ruth. She patted the chair beside her. Tell me how my grandson finally tricked someone into loving him.
How?
Julian choked on his water. I launched into our dog park story, adding details I hadn't cleared with him, how his dog, a Vizsla, we named Atticus, stole my coffee, and Julian offered to replace it, then insisted on buying me breakfast to make up for the trauma. Ruth laughed until she coughed, and Julian stared at me across the table like I'd rewritten gravity. Later, under the table, his hand found my knee and stayed there. Not for show, just stayed. The second event was a charity gala for the Children's Hospital. I wore tuxedo. Julian's bow tie matched my eyes, he claimed. We danced because Ruth was watching from her wheelchair near the string quartet, beaming like we'd hung the moon. Halfway through the night, he pulled me onto the balcony, city lights glittering on wet pavement below. You were brilliant tonight, he said quietly. It's easy when they already love you. He shook his head. They love you. My mom asked if you'd come to Easter. Easter, Levi. I laughed, trying for lightness. Guess we'll need a breakup story by April. His face did something complicated. Yeah, guess so. The third event was Ruth's 85th birthday, a garden party at the family estate on Bainbridge Island. Ruth wanted to dance with me. She was frail but determined. I held her carefully, one hand on her waist, the other holding her oxygen tank so it wouldn't bang her hip. She laid her head on my shoulder. You make him soft, she whispered, in the best way. Don't let him scare you off when he tries. He will try. I couldn't. That night, Julian and I sat on the dock long after everyone else had gone inside. Moonlight on the water, the air smelling of salt and cedar. I keep thinking about after, I said. When the 6 weeks are up, I go back to my life. You go back to yours. He was quiet for a long time. I don't want you to. My heart stuttered. Julian, I know how this started, he said quickly. I know I paid you. But somewhere between the note cards and Atticus, the imaginary dog, I stopped pretending. I don't know how to go back to being the guy who wrote you a check. I looked at him, rain starting again, soft as breath on his lashes. Me neither, I said. He kissed me then, no audience, no script. Just us and the sound of water against the pilings and the realization that we'd already lost the plot entirely. The final event was supposed to be Christmas Eve at the house in Laurelhurst. Ruth had been moved to hospice. We brought her presents anyway, cashmere blanket the color of sea glass. A printed draft of my novel with a fake dedication page that read to Julian, who taught me some storms are worth walking into. She held the pages like they were made of gold. I won't finish it, she said, voice paper thin, but I'm so proud I got to meet the man who will. Julian's hand trembled in mine. 3 days later, she was gone, at the funeral. I stood beside him in the rain while they lowered her casket. He didn't cry until the first shovel of dirt hit the wood. Then he folded in half, like someone had punched him in the soul. I held him up the way he'd once held me steady in 100 small moments that were never part of the contract. After, in the car, he said, I don't want the money back. I never cashed the second check, I told him. He laughed, a broken sound. Of course you didn't. We drove to my apartment, my tiny, leaky, perfect apartment, because he said didn't want to be in his big, empty condo. We didn't speak. Just stripped off wet clothes and crawled into my narrow bed, like we'd done it 1,000 times. He fell asleep with his head on my chest. Fingers curled into my t-shirt like he was afraid I'd vanish. In the morning, he made coffee in my chipped French press and said, "So, 6 weeks are up." I leaned against the counter, heart hammering. "They are. Any chance you'd consider a permanent arrangement?" His voice was steady, but his hands shook around the mug. "Terrible pay. Long hours. High probability of falling hopelessly in love with your insufferable boyfriend." I crossed the kitchen and kissed him, soft and slow and certain. "I'll take it," I said against his mouth. "But I want it in writing this time." He laughed. Really laughed. For the first time in weeks, we signed nothing. We didn't need to. Some contracts. Our written in salt and rain, and the kind of truth that doesn't fit on note cards. And some stories, the best ones, start out as lies and end up being the truest thing you've ever lived. My name is Julian Vale, and 3 months ago, I was broke, overdrawn, and living on instant noodles in a studio apartment that smelled faintly of old takeout and regret. That was when Leo Harrington walked into the little independent bookstore, where I worked part-time, and asked me out of every desperate soul in the city to be his boyfriend for 6 weeks. Leo was 32, heir to a hospitality empire, and the most beautiful man I'd ever seen in real life. Dark hair that fell just enough into his eyes. A mouth that looked like it had been built for trouble, and the kind of quiet intensity that made people lean in when he spoke. He wore tailored coats like armor and smiled like he was afraid someone might believe it. His grandmother, Eleanor, was turning 85. She was sharp, loving, terrifying, and dying. The doctors gave her months, maybe a year. All she wanted before she went was to see Leo settled. Leo, who had spent the last decade dodging commitment the way other people dodge taxes, panicked. And somehow that panic led him to me. He offered me $50,000, enough to clear my debts, keep the lights on, and maybe, just maybe, finish the novel I'd been writing in the margins of my life for 4 years. All I had to do was smile, hold his hand, and convince a dying woman that her grandson had finally found someone who loved him. I said yes before my pride could stop me. Week 1, the first dinner was at Eleanor's townhouse on the Upper East Side. I wore the navy suit Leo had sent over with a note that said, "You'll look perfect in this. Don't argue." His family was everything mine wasn't. Loud, warm, overlapping voices, wine that cost more than my rent. His sister Margot kept refilling my glass and asking if I was keeping my brother in line. His cousin Theo told embarrassing stories about Leo at 16 trying to dye his hair platinum and ending up orange. Eleanor watched it all with bright, bird-like eyes and squeezed my hand when I sat beside her. "You make him laugh," she said quietly, while Leo was dragged away to help with dessert. I haven't heard him laugh like that in years. I smiled like my heart wasn't cracking in half. Later, on the front steps, Leo lit a cigarette he didn't really want and stared at the sky. "You were brilliant," he said. I lied to a dying woman with my whole chest. "She's happy," he answered. "That's not nothing. Not once. Not even when we said goodnight. Week 2, we started practicing." That was the word he used. Practicing how to stand close enough that it looked natural. How to let our fingers brush when we passed the salt. How to laugh at the same moment when someone told a story we'd both heard before. The first time he kissed me, it was clinical. We were in his apartment, high ceilings, bookshelves full of first editions, a view of the park that made me dizzy. He'd made pasta and opened a bottle of Barolo like it was nothing. "We should probably practice this part too," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. So we did. He leaned in slow, giving me every chance to laugh it off. I didn't. His mouth was soft and warm and tasted like red wine and nerves. When he pulled back, his eyes were wide, like he'd surprised himself. That was fine, I managed. "Fine," he repeated, voice rough. "Great." We didn't do it again for a week. Week 3, the lines started disappearing. He texted me good morning with photos of his coffee. I sent him voice notes of lines I'd written that I thought were terrible. He always said they were beautiful. We met for breakfast on Tuesdays at a tiny place in the village where the owner knew my order. He started cooking for me on Thursdays always. Something complicated, always slightly oversalted because he got distracted watching me work at his kitchen island. One night, I fell asleep on his couch with my laptop on my chest. I woke up at 3 a.m. with a cashmere blanket tucked around me and Leo asleep in the armchair across the room. One hand stretched out like he'd been reaching for me before he passed out. I stared at him for a long time. Then I went home. Week 4. The Galitha. Charity Gala was black tie, held in a ballroom that dripped crystal and money. Leo picked me up in a tux that made my mouth dry. He looked at me in the mirror while I fixed my bow tie and said, very quietly, "You're unfairly beautiful. You know that?" I laughed it off. Inside, we were perfect. His hand on the small of my back, guiding me through the crowd. Introducing me as Julian, my partner, like the word, didn't cost him anything. People smiled and asked how we met. We had a story. The bookstore. A rainy day. Me recommending him a poetry collection he pretended to hate. Was half true. The rain part, at least. When the orchestra started a slow song, he didn't ask. He just took my hand and pulled me onto the floor. "I'm going to step on you," I warned. "I'll survive." We moved together like we'd done it 100 times. His hand was warm through my shirt. My cheek brushed the lapel of his jacket, and I could smell his cologne, something expensive and smoky. "Julian," said against my temple. "Look at me." Did. "I think I forgot this was pretend," he said. My heart stopped. Started again. Stuttered. "Leo, I know. I know it's stupid. I know we have an expiration date. But he swallowed. "I don't want to pretend anymore." Then he kissed me in the middle of the ballroom, with hundreds of people watching, and I kissed him back like I was drowning and he was air. Week 5, we didn't talk about it the next day. Or the day after that, we just kept going. He held my hand in cabs, kissed me goodbye at my door, left his toothbrush in my bathroom like it belonged there. But the party was coming. Leonard's big birthday. The finish line. And every time I tried to bring it up, he changed the subject. Week 6. 3 days before the party, I was at his place again. I'd started leaving things there, books, a hoodie. The stupid stuffed octopus he'd won for me at a street fair and insisted I name Sir Inksalot. His phone rang while we were on the couch, my feet in his lap, his thumb tracing absent circles on my ankle. He glanced at the screen, and his whole body went stiff. "I have to take this," he said, standing too fast. He went into the bedroom and shut the door, but I could still hear him. "No, Marcus. I told you I'm with someone. His name is Julian. Yes, it's serious." "No, I'm not. Because I daren't want to. Because he sees me. The real me. It's not the version you wanted to fix." My lungs forgot how to work. When he came back, his face was blank. "X," he said, like that explained everything. I stood up. "Tell me the truth, Leo. Is any of this real for you? Or am I just the best actor you could afford?" He looked like I'd slapped him. "Julian, because I'm in love with you," I said, the words ripping out of me like shrapnel. "I'm stupidly, hopelessly in love with you, and if this is still just a job to you, I need to know before I make a complete fool of myself at your grandmother's party." He stared at me for a long time. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides and kissed me like the world was ending. "It stopped being pretend the first time you laughed at one of my stupid jokes," he said against my mouth. "I've been trying to find a way to keep you without breaking the rules we made. I don't know how to do this. I only know I can't lose you." "So don't," I whispered. The party Eleanor's birthday was held in the garden of her estate upstate. Fairy lights in the trees, a string quartet, tables overflowing with peonies and champagne. Leo found me an hour before the toast, pulled me into the library, and shut the door. "I have to tell them," he said. "I can't lie to her anymore. Not on her birthday. Not when he didn't finish. He didn't have to. We walked out together. Took the microphone from the band leader, his hand shaking around mine. "Gran," he started, voice cracking. "There's something I need to tell you. All of you." The garden went quiet. "Julian and I didn't meet the way we said. I hired him to pretend. Because I was scared of letting you down. But somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending, and I fell in love with him, for real, and I'm sorry I lied. But I'm not sorry it brought him to me." Eleanor looked at us for a long moment, and she stood slowly, carefully, and walked over. She took my face in her frail hands and kissed my forehead. "Then you'd better keep him," she said to Leo. "He's family now." Later, when the cake was cut and the music was loud and everyone was crying or laughing or both, Leo found me under the lights. So he said, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind, "6 weeks are up." I turned in his arms. "What happens now?" "No," he said, "we figure out the rest. Together. No contract. No expiration date. Just us." I kissed him under the stars, while his grandmother watched and smiled, like she'd known all along. And for the first time in my life, the story I was living felt better than anything I could have written. My name is Luca Rossi, and 6 months ago, I was 3 days away from having my electricity shut off. That's when I saw the listing on a private university alumni board, seeking temporary boyfriend for family event season. Generous compensation. Discretion required. Serious inquiries only. I laughed out loud in my freezing apartment, then stopped laughing when I realized I was actually considering it. Rent was 2 months late. My graphic design freelance gigs had dried up. My mother kept leaving voicemails asking why I hadn't visited in a year, so I replied. His name was Julian Hawthorne, 34, architect, polite to the point of formality in his emails. He sent a contract before we even met in person. The terms were insane. 3 months, 5 family functions, 1 weekend lake house retreat with his entire extended clan, plus weekly dinners to maintain authenticity. Payment. Enough to clear my debt and keep me afloat for a year. We met at a quiet wine bar in the Pearl district to see if we could stand each other. Julian was taller than I expected. Dark hair falling over wire-rimmed glasses, wearing an immaculate navy suit like armor. Beautiful in the way marble statues are beautiful, and untouchable. He shook my hand like we were closing a business merger. "Ground rules," he said before I'd even sat down. "No sex, no social media posts without approval. No falling in love with me or anyone else while this is active. I need my grandmother to believe I'm settled. That's all." I almost walked out right then. Almost. But I thought of the red overdue stamps on my bills and said, I can do detached. The first dinner was torture. His grandmother, Eleanor Hawthorne, 87, sharp as winter air, eyes like a hawk's, at the head of a mahogany table that probably cost more than my childhood home. She studied me the way museum curators study questionable provenance. Julian performed flawlessly, hand on the small of my back. Murmured endearments, the perfect volume for eavesdropping relatives. I laughed at the right moments, remembered the names of his cousin's children, complimented Eleanor's roses. By dessert, she was calling me darling, and pressing extra slices of pear tart on me. Julian's shoulders loosened a fraction. Contractual success. Afterward, in the car, he handed me an envelope thick with cash. "You were perfect." His praise felt like a gold star on a report card I hadn't wanted to earn. We kept meeting. Brunch with his sister Vivian, who watched me like she was memorizing weaknesses. A charity gala, where I wore the tuxedo head tailored for me without asking my size. Sunday lunch, where Eleanor quizzed me about my intentions, and I somehow charmed her into laughing so hard she snorted champagne, and somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd month, the performance started feeling comfortable. Julian would text me memes at 2 a.m. when he couldn't sleep before a presentation. I'd send him photos of ridiculous street art I found on my runs. He started cooking for me on nights when the show didn't require an audience. Simple things. Pasta uglio, e olio. Roasted chicken, then linger at the table, talking about light filtration in modern buildings, while I sketched on the back of his electricity bill. One night in November it snowed. It's rare for Portland. We were stuck at his loft after a fake double date that got canceled last minute. He built a fire. I drank too much red wine. We ended up on opposite ends of his leather sectional, knees almost touching. Why are you really doing this? You could have hired an actor who doesn't mouth off when your uncle starts ranting about politics. Julian stared into the flames. My grandmother is dying. Slowly. Heart failure. She's terrified I'll be alone when she's gone. The rest of the family already has their live spouses, kids, dogs, mortgages. I'm the leftover Hawthorne. She thinks love skipped me. Gave a bitter laugh. I let her think I agreed to settle down so she could die happy. The confession hung between us like smoke. I moved closer without meaning to. "You're not left over." He looked at me then, really looked, and something shifted. The air felt suddenly too small. The kiss happened by accident. I was reaching to take his wine glass. He was turning to set it down. Our mouths collided awkward, clumsy, perfect. We froze. Then his hand came up to cradle my jaw like I was something breakable. And he kissed me again, deliberate and devastating. When we pulled apart, he whispered, "This violates Clause 7. Clause 7 can get fucked," I said, and kissed him back. After that, everything was terrifying. We still had one major event left, Eleanor's Christmas Eve party, the one she'd been planning for a year, the one where she wanted to announce Julian's engagement to the entire family. We spent nights whispering in his bed, like teenagers plotting escape. "We could tell her the truth," I said, tracing the constellation of freckles across his shoulder. "She might understand. She's dying, Luca. I won't take this from her. So we get engaged. Pretend. One more time." He was quiet so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. "Then what if we didn't pretend?" My heart stopped. "You want to marry me to keep your grandmother from heartbreak?" "No," he said fiercely. "I want to marry you because somewhere between you stealing the last dumpling at Dintai, Fung, and calling my Eames chair overpriced kindling, I fell in love with you, hopelessly, irreversibly, and I'm selfish enough to want forever, even if it started with a lie." I couldn't speak. So I kissed him until words weren't necessary. Christmas Eve arrived, glittering and merciless. The Hawthorne estate was transformed thousands of white lights. Orchids flown in from Hawaii, a string quartet playing Vivaldi. Eleanor wore midnight blue velvet and the diamond brooch her husband had given her 70 years ago. She looked fragile and luminous. Julian wore the navy suit from our first meeting. I wore the tux again, but this time he'd added a sprig of holly in the lapel for luck. Halfway through dinner, Eleanor tapped her crystal glass with a spoon. The room quieted. "I have an announcement," she said, voice trembling but strong. "This will be my last Christmas." Gasps. Someone dropped a fork. Julian went white. She held up a hand. "I've had a long, rich life. Longer than most. But before I go, I wanted one thing. To see my favorite grandson happy. Truly happy." Her gaze found us. "Julie and Luca, come here." We obeyed like children. She took our hands. Hers were paper-thin but warm. "I knew," she said simply. Julian made a strangled sound. "Grand hush. I knew the day you brought." Luca to Sunday lunch, and he complimented my atrocious hydrangeas just to make me smile. Real couples bicker about hydrangeas. "You two only had eyes for each other," she smiled, eyes wet. "I played along because sometimes people need a little push. And because I wanted to watch you fall in love when you thought no one was looking." I was crying. Julian was crying. Half the table was crying. So, Eleanor continued, "I'm not waiting for an engagement announcement. I'm making one. These two ridiculous, stubborn, brilliant men are getting married next spring. Under my rose arbor, because I intend to be there. Damn it, Tand, I expect everyone to show up in pastel whether you like it or not." Laughter broke the tears. Applause thundered later on the frost-covered terrace. Julian pulled me into the shadows by the koi pond. "She beat us to it," he said, voice thick. "Meddling old woman," I agreed. Tears still falling, he dropped to one knee right there in the snow. Suit be damned, and pulled out a Ringo Gata ring. A simple platinum band with a single black diamond. "I was going to do this in April, under the roses like she wants, but I can't wait." His hand shook. "Luca Rossi, you wrecked every plan I ever had. You made me believe in things I'd given up on. Marry me. For real? Forever? Please?" I tackled him into the snow. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." We kissed while snowflakes melted on our eyelashes, while the party carried on inside. While Eleanor almost certainly watched from the window and smiled her victorious smile, 8 months later, on a warm May afternoon, we were married under that rose arbor. Eleanor made a cheese, danced with both of us, barefoot in the grass, laughing until she cried. My mother hugged Julian so hard she cracked his ribs. Vivian gave a toast that roasted us mercilessly and ended with her sobbing into her champagne. The novel I wrote about Ustand's arrangement came out the following year. I dedicated it to E.H., who taught me love is worth the risk, and to J., who proved it. At the launch party, Julian stood beside me, signing books with a Sharpie that said, "Property of the husband." Eleanor sat in the front row, wearing a ridiculous fascinator shaped like a peacock. When someone asked where the story came from, I looked at Julian, my husband. "Impossible and perfect," and Manan said. From answering an ad I never should have clicked, from pretending until I couldn't anymore, from discovering that sometimes the best love of your life might be the man who once paid you to lie to his grandmother. The audience laughed. Julian kissed me in front of all of them. Soft and reverent. Love isn't always convenient. It doesn't arrive with trumpets or perfect timing. Sometimes it starts with a contract and a lie and a heart too scared to. Hope. But when it's real, when you find the person who sees every cracked, imperfect piece of you and says, "Stay anyway," you hold on. We held on, and we never let go.